Chapter 9. A Matter of Principle. Ari had not heard from Roger since being taken from his apartment at gunpoint years ago, nor had he attempted to contact him, suspecting that his mail and phone lines were under Stasi surveillance. Then one day, the remarkable Texan had walked unannounced into Ari's office at the university. What a deliriously happy reunion that had been. Roger told how he had diligently pursued every diplomatic channel in an attempt to learn what had happened to Ari after his arrest, but without any success. He had eventually assumed that Ari had been executed. It had been nearly 13 years later, while watching a French news program that he sometimes picked up from a satellite dish, that he had recognized Ari in a feature story about the Sorbonne. Not long after that, the American had come to Paris to present an irresistible offer to his old friend from East Germany. Roger had revealed at their first meeting in Paris that for years he had represented a mysterious group of secretive and extremely wealthy and powerful men who controlled a multi-billion-dollar international banking conglomerate. This consortium was interested in financing viable efforts to bring down communist regimes around the world, which explained Roger's interest in Ari when they had originally met in East Berlin. Though millions of dollars had been expended, none of the efforts of these financiers had brought any success. Something more than money was needed. Through their CIA connections, the syndicate had begun to suspect that a well-organized, clandestine student organization with the same goals as theirs was operating internationally. Yet even with their Interpol contacts, all attempts to infiltrate or even to contact the leadership of this impenetrable network had proved futile. Then came Roger's chance discovery that Ari was alive and teaching at the Sorbonne. He immediately suspected that his old friend might be the one heading this intriguing student movement and had come to Paris to find out whether that was the case. Ari was careful to reveal nothing, but he did admit to Roger at their first meeting that he was indeed the man who was running the operation that had so intrigued his colleagues and that the CIA had been unable to crack. The conglomerate not only had CIA connections, but its influence reached into the highest levels of governments around the world, from the White House to the inner circle of the Kremlin itself. Roger explained to Ari that there were men rising to the top in Soviet leadership who were very much in sympathy with bringing down the wall, liberating Eastern Europe, and destroying Marxism. The question was how to do it, and Ari's group seemed to be the answer for which they had searched for so many years. The international bankers wanted their organization and themselves individually to remain anonymous, even to Ari, because the men involved were household names worldwide. Ari suspected that Roger's father was among them, and perhaps the leader, but their identities were immaterial. What mattered was their wealth and their willingness to use it in the right way. Through Roger, this unusual group had offered virtually unlimited funds to finance Ari's operation. While this was exactly what Ari needed, he had pretended reluctance to accept the offer. "I don't want to be indebted to anyone," he had told Roger. "Financial partners eventually make demands for information and participation that I can't and will not agree to." "That's exactly the way we want it," Roger had assured him. "Take my word for it, these men have no intention of ever attempting to move in and take over. You'll have complete autonomy to run your program independently, no questions asked. Secrecy on both sides and absolute trust, that's the only rule." The arrangement had seemed to be ideal and had worked well for nearly 10 years. The funds this group had provided had made it possible for Ari to greatly expand and accelerate his program. Unfortunately, the marriage of convenience had become increasingly strained in recent months. The partners no longer agreed on the principles Ari had once thought they held in common. The only bond that remained was principle, the huge sums of money that they controlled and were still willing to hand over to him and that he desperately needed to hold his huge organization together. Ari had good reason to suspect, however, that even that bond was weakening, that the consortium was laying plans to eliminate him and take control. To protect himself, Ari had, from the first day of their association, wisely begun a program of infiltration that had successfully penetrated the top levels of Roger's organization. One of the first findings his moles had passed on had confirmed his earliest suspicions. that Roger, unknown to the banking consortium and even to his own father, was actually working for the CIA. That startling discovery had raised serious questions concerning the very foundation of their friendship and had destroyed any hope that Ari could count on Roger's loyalty. Ari had begun to sense a growing tension between Roger's professed friendship for him and his obligation to the consortium. While pretending to side with Ari at first, off the record of course, Roger had stiffened his stance recently. New demands had been made by Roger on behalf of his superiors that were not in keeping with the original agreement. Today's meeting had been called to resolve some issues that threatened to destroy their relationship and its goals. Ari settled back in the cab and stared out the window. Roger unobtrusively slid a thick envelope across the seat between them. Ari knew, without looking, what was in it. The usual 50 or so checks in odd amounts between $20,000 and $30,000 from a number of dummy corporations whose names kept changing, and that, unlike automatic banking fund transfers, no one could trace. He had tried. He would deposit the funds over the next 10 days in a dozen bank accounts that he maintained around the city. Still observing the scenery out the window, Ari, with one swift motion, slipped the envelope into an inside pocket of his sports jacket. "Good job," murmured Roger softly in Russian. "It's going to break wide open in China, soon." "And I'm very unhappy about it," shot back Ari under his breath. Russian, forced on him in East German schools, was one of several languages in which he was fluent. It was the one he and Roger usually spoke whenever someone, even an apparently chance cabbie, might overhear them. "Your group is interfering, rushing it. It won't work. There's going to be a massacre. Our intelligence, and we've got the best, says it's the right time and will succeed. It won't. You've got to call off your dogs. Stop interfering." "What do you mean, interfering?" "I'm talking about Chang Li and his cronies. Chang Li is a good man. He has the confidence of both the students and the workers. He's only trying to help you. I didn't ask for help. We thought you'd appreciate it." "That's a violation of our deal. I'm supposed to run the operation, and Chang Li's involvement is a direct challenge to my leadership. It's going to bring disaster." "Spell it out." "You've got some greedy bankers who want to make money in China and can't wait. They're pushing it. This guy, Li, is their man. Very charismatic. He's got the students excited. They're moving too soon. I'm telling you, there's going to be a massacre." "You're convinced of that?" Roger seemed genuinely surprised and concerned. 100%, said Ari. "I was there last week." "In Beijing? That's where you were when your goons couldn't find me for 4 days? That's right." "You never cease to amaze me, Ari," said Roger grudgingly, but unable to hide the admiration in his voice. "Our best men. And you lose them, and they don't know how you do it." Ari made no reply. There was an uncomfortable silence. At last Roger said, "You're not supposed to do that. Their job is to protect you." "So I've been told." "It reflects on me." Ari frowned. "Protection was never part of the deal. I never agreed to it. So when I don't want them, I lose them. You and I used to be close friends. I trusted you. Now I wonder, are you just naive, or are you feeding me a line?" Roger hitched around in his seat to look Ari in the eye. "If you were in Beijing, how come none of our people there knew it?" "Because I know who they are, and I wouldn't let them get within a Texas mile of me. Look, I know what I'm talking about, and I want Li, that little Caesar, called off." Roger threw up his hands in helpless protest and fell back in the seat. "How did you get to Beijing and back without our knowing it?" Ari laughed. "That's my secret. I met with my top leaders for 2 days, a dozen of them." His voice grew angry again. "They've lost control to this guy Li, and they're worried about what's going to happen. Maybe Li's gone beyond what we wanted him to do, even acting on his own. I'll look into it." "Look, Roger, I know the situation. Your people put Li in there, and they're backing him. That's a violation of our deal. No one's supposed to interfere. You put up the money, I run the revolution. Call him off, now, before it's too late." "I'll check into it." "Checking isn't enough. If he isn't taken out of Beijing within 48 hours at the most, we're finished. I'm going to lose my best people to slaughter or prison. They can't back away. They'd lose face, be dead for future leadership. Chang is calling a strike they know will bring disaster, but they have to be in the front lines. 10 years of my careful work, backed by your money, is going to be wiped out. Roger looked worried. I'll take care of it, if you're right. But my people have some complaints, too. They think you're dragging your feet, not just in Beijing, but in Berlin and all over Eastern Europe. They want a schedule, and they want a list. And I've told you they're not going to get either. If that breaks up our relationship... Ari turned away to look out the window again. It's not unreasonable, Ari. We should be able to work this out. They're not asking for a complete list. They were, and there's nothing to work out. That demand was a mistake. They've dropped it. They just want the name, address, and phone number of your top man in each major center. In case of emergency, it takes too long to notify you and then have you contact your people. They want to be able to go directly. That's not unreasonable. It makes good sense. It makes no sense. I'm in charge, right? Snapped Ari. I decide whether it's an emergency, and I give all orders, nobody else. I've got to have complete autonomy and secrecy, and your people agreed. It took me 20 years to build this organization, and I'm not betraying anyone. Betraying? That's what you call giving us your key names? Betraying? You think we're the enemy? Ari turned and faced Roger. You tell your bosses that they're not getting any names. Not one. That was our deal from day one, and I've never agreed to a change. And I won't. Roger took a deep breath. Circumstances have changed. It's been 10 years, and we've invested hundreds of millions, and we're just about there. Berlin has to come before Beijing, and if you interfere, we've got the best intelligence in the world, and we think it has to be the other way around. Ari pulled the bulging envelope from his pocket and put it on the seat next to Roger. I got along very well without your money for the first 10 years. Roger stared at the envelope in silence for a moment, then shoved it back toward Ari. I thought you trusted me. I trust you, but I don't trust your bosses. They're the ones I worry about, the committee you report to, and the people at the top behind them. They know who I am. I don't know who they are, and they complain about not getting a list. They know where to find me at any hour of the day or night. Their goons never leave me, and that worries me. I don't know where to find you until you tell me where we rendezvous next. There was another long, uncomfortable silence. Okay, conceded Roger at last. I understand your perspective. I'll take your message and do my best to persuade them. Persuade? Interrupted Ari. I'm not negotiating. He shoved the money back to Roger. Take it. Roger quickly shoved the envelope back toward Ari. Calm down. Your fuse is too short. I know my people. They're not trying to pressure you. They wanted to help. They thought it would be an improvement. But they don't want to break the deal. They'll go along with it the way it was. There was another long silence. At last Ari said, I was reading a book the other day by an ex-CIA agent. It's banned in the United States, but available over here. It's called Blowing the Whistle. I've read it, cut in Roger, and it's baloney. Really? Are you an expert on the CIA? You don't have to be. It's obviously sensationalism, yellow journalism. The guy's trying to make a buck. Ari smiled and gave Roger a skeptical look. Why are you so hot to defend the CIA? I'm not defending the CIA. I'm simply telling you the guy's a screwball. I didn't read it that way, responded Ari, observing Roger closely. I thought he sounded intelligent, knowledgeable. I must say I was surprised by his claim that the CIA has won the race with the KGB for psychic power, and that's why Gorbachev came up with glasnost and perestroika. But it does make sense. Makes sense, retorted Roger derisively. Psychic powers? Sounds like science fiction. Like I said, the guy's a loony. Maybe, but what fascinated me the most was his claim that the CIA developed these psychic powers through contact with entities from another dimension. Another dimension? What does that mean? Roger was beginning to look uncomfortable. Was he really contemptuous of the book's theory, or was he trying to cover up? Something beyond the physical. After all, your top space scientist, Robert Jastrow, you know, he heads the Goddard Space Institute that sent out Pioneer and Voyager, claims there could be entities out there that have evolved beyond the need of bodies and are pure intelligence. Ghosts, right? Snorted Roger derisively. You can't be serious. Well, Jastro is. Isn't there a worldwide program to contact extraterrestrial intelligences? Yeah, Carl Sagan's pushing it, but I think it's a waste of money. That's your opinion, but some of the best scientific minds think it's worthwhile. So getting back to the book, why couldn't the CIA be in touch with such entities telepathically, like the man said? The guy's a kook. Why are you so touchy on this subject? I'm not, snapped Roger, but there was no hiding the irritation in his voice. We're wasting time. Get to the point, if you've got one. I'm just trying to explore a possibility. Those 3 Stasi agents who hauled me out of your apartment rescued you, interjected Roger. Remarkable. Ari nodded. And even more remarkable is the fact that one of them, the same character who haunts me in nightmares, showed up here in Paris. He was a German in Berlin, and here in Paris he's a Frenchman. Same guy, yet different. You've told me that. Why bring it up now? Because this book gives a possible explanation. He said he was a mentor from another dimension. I laughed that off at first, too, just like you're doing. But now this author claims that the CIA has made contact with something that sounds similar. It could be the explanation to something that's puzzled me for years. You're out of your mind. And I think you're hiding something from me. Roger looked pained, but made no reply. He opened his mouth to say something, hesitated, then closed it again. I met them at your apartment. I was as surprised as you were. They appear when they want to and do what they please, complained Ari. They invade my dreams, give me nightmares. I think they set me up at the Sorbonne. There's something weird going on. They looked ordinary to me, certainly not from another dimension, said Roger. Rogue Stasi agents, working for the West, that's my guess, maybe using mind control techniques. Why rescue me? There's something I'm missing. They invade your apartment and haul me out, pretend to arrest me, then get me into the West. Years later, the head guy shows up here, gives me instructions, and then you come along to finance the operation. I think they've got some relationship with your group. Roger's discomfort was obvious. He shifted uneasily in his seat and retorted angrily, Look, Ari, I'm not going to respond to your wild speculation, so let's drop it. Okay, but I still think you're hiding something. Roger opened his mouth to speak, then clamped it shut and turned to look out the window. For some moments, neither spoke a word. At last, Ari broke the silence. At least we got one thing settled. You'll make it very clear to the committee. I will, and they'll go along, said Roger, but they won't like it. Not because they have any evil designs, as you seem to suspect. The only reason they wanted more information was in case something happened to you. What then? You know everything, and nobody else knows anything. It's not good. That's what we worry about. So do I, retorted Ari quickly. If your group knew what I know, they might get the dangerous idea that they didn't need me anymore. You need me more than you imagine, so tell them that. Roger let out a long sigh. You're a tough nut, Ari. I'm a survivor, and I intend to stay alive long enough to see this thing through. Ari shoved the envelope back into his pocket. The cab pulled over to the curb. Tour Eiffel, called the driver. 26 francs, s'il vous plaît. You tell your bosses, said Ari quietly as he pulled a handful of change out of his pocket and handed the cabbie 3 10-franc pieces. It's got to be first Berlin, then Moscow, and only then Beijing, and I want Chang Li called off immediately. Keep the change, he said to the driver, and climbed out of the cab without another word or a backward glance.